Look at all these good reviews. And yet, nobody cared. No one talks about them and no one ever will. No matter how much you try to talk about personality and underrated indie titles, no one cares. And no, I didn't play every single game this year, not even the big publishers I am criticizing. But then again, over $1,000? I would never pay that amount of money for games in a year ever. But when you tone it down, 2025 was the year where we got arguably the second most hyped game of all time after GTA 6. And just in a matter of 2 months, no one cares anymore. It's fascinating how a game that was hyped for years came out of nowhere and died just as fast as any other game. Sure, it is a single-player experience, but if you compare the overwhelming hype Silksong had to the cultural impact that Expedition 33 had, is night and day, man. And the reason for it is that Silksong isn't bad, but isn't as good as well. The game gets truly interesting in Act 2, but until you reach that point, it's such an investment on a mediocre experience that it flats out fast. Hollow Knight was a better experience overall, without a shadow of a doubt. And expectation is a dangerous weapon, because when something gets special before release, and by the time it comes out it's not even half the beast it was supposed to be, it turns into disappointment, even if you're scared to admit it. However, Silksong is like the middle of the road in these problems, just a solid 6.5 out of 10 game, because the rot runs deeper with the big industry. It's so monotonous to see greedy companies fall to the exact same bad decisions all the time. Mario Kart World was a disaster and a middle finger for everyone who bought that shit. I don't sympathize with Nintendo shills at all, but holy hell, intermission races instead of the real ones, a world dull as wet cardboard, and $80, man. Development crisis is real. There's so much negligent devs and publishers that buries their own game for no reason. Monster Hunter Wilds is a catastrophe on the performance. It destroyed the game solely on how bad it runs, even on high-end software, and instead of handling it, Capcom simply decided to move on because the cells were there already. Kinda. Same could be said on Borderlands 4's disastrous launch. Game barely worked, and when you got to play it, it wasn't even that good. As someone who is not a Borderlands fan, so take it with a grain of salt, the game sucked ass from what I saw. In my understanding of someone who is not into the franchise and never will, the story is trash, the dialogues are broken, the humor is not there but the characters act as if it was. Open world fatigue. Also, you should go check that video out I did, and it went abysmally bad, but I really liked it, so please give it a try. And of course, the game runs terribly. We also have the classic case of cosmetics behind paywalls in so many games, a culture that is extremely saturated but refuses to die because people keep paying for them for some reason, instead of the good old case of play to acquire. It's not limited to Monster Hunter, it has roots in so many other titles, ever since that stupid horse, all those fucking years ago. Aside from the dip and grind that Wilds took, crafting was made easier through hunting and the overall difficulty system was botched. Borderlands 4 on the other hand, I mean, that's just a dead franchise at this point. No one cares about it really, yet they wanted to sell it for $1 bajillion per copy. And just out of curiosity, do you guys remember Avowed, the Skyrim killer? Yeah, it didn't went so well, huh? Terrible visuals, boring gameplay and so on. There seems to be a formula here, huh? Oh, and in case you have also forgotten, Mind's Eye came out this year. That's a little fun fact for you. Bet you didn't even remember that Abomination existed, right? And the same thing will happen with Bloodlines 2 and Outer Worlds 2. In 2 weeks, these games will fade away as well, because they are trash. But by far, the 2 titles that hurt me personally the most were Silent Hill Furry and Doom Doomer Ages. Silent Hill F, I made a video venting off of it. how much I hated its art direction, but it's incredible how much everything in that game is bad to a certain degree. It's astonishing to see people defend this, honestly. Nothing in it resembles the series, and by God, the game's combat is terrible. The story is atrocious, and the worst part is having to hear people say, "Well, actually, as a longtime fan of the series," and then proceed to give you the worst review you have ever heard. "But did you play the new game plus? There's like ton of new content and..." Of course I didn't. The game is ass. And even if it did suddenly turn into a 10, which is impossible, for you to get the best story experience out of a game after 10 hours of bad stuff, that is not a good marketing tool. Nier did that in 2010 with awesome replayability that added so much to the lore, but the base game was cool as hell in the first place. Nothing makes me want to ever hop on this game again. And Doom the Cuck Ages had the audacity to put Dragon gameplay sections that felt like a mobile slop game, and the mecha sessions were mediocre at best and underwhelming at worst. The guns in the game have way less weight and impact than previous entries had. The tone and atmosphere of 2016 is still unmatched. The industrial grit that game had is just high fantasy spectacle now. You can see why I hate these two games so much, huh? Atmosphere matters a lot to me. The signature glory kills are toned down like HR said to Bethesda, "Nah, that's too cool, we need to appeal to those who don't like it as much." And I won't mention the OST that is so downgraded. Mick Gordon's music is simply otherworldly. He understood the assignment in 2016, and even when he was getting back shots during Eternal, he still delivered despite that. What a fucking legend. I didn't even went on the story cause honestly, better not. I hate these games especially because I played them and have a stronger connection to their story. I love the previous titles and I miss them so much, and both fumbled hard on almost the same things for different reasons. But well, moving on, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 sucked as well. Don't you love to play a game where you are constantly being put into humiliation situations? A game where your choices barely matters? To be indoctrinated and looked down by so many NPCs like you are trash? To constantly tell you that your culture is inferior and you suck? Even as a video game, it is inferior to the first title in almost every single way, which is kinda impressive because gameplay wasn't the best already. No innovation aside from crossbows and hand cannons. The combat is worse than the first one with terrible hit detection. The block repost cycle is boring, and so on. People who defend this, they didn't play it. And speaking of shit, my reminder that video games, no matter the title, setting or tone, millennial writing bros.
Damn. That'll be as hairy as the balls of St. Killian.
And of course, Ghost of Yote. Dude, the graphics are so good. And nothing else was said about the game positively. You know this sucked ass when Shadows was the better version of this game. What a fumble yet again. You had the IP for the game that should have won Game of the Year in 2020 over that abomination, and your decision is to do this? Not to mention the terrible timing with poor social media management. The fact Sony didn't glaze the sales tell you everything you need to know about this game. And speaking of the demon, yes, AC Shadows came this year as well. Yeah, let's just forget about that. Slop Up 7 haven't even released yet and everyone knows it's going to suck. I never would have thought Battlefield would clean swipe COD after 2013, and I would have never thought I'd see Skate 4 in my life, let alone being this terrible. And I'm not even a Skate fan. Everything sucks, man. Of course, I didn't play everything, nor seen everything. And if, for example, Hades 2 and Split Fiction were good, that's good for you. I don't really got the time to play stuff, and there's so many old games I still want to experience for the first time. But after this year's constant flops, I think I might hate games after all. Or at least a good portion of what's being released currently. A relaunch of a game from the 90s and arguably my favorite game of all time instead of good interesting titles inspired by these old masterpieces. The industry cannot create anything, just resell them as worst versions. Now, I dislike to simply throw stuff around without any sort of good ending or provocative thought. And in this case, I need to say this. Positivity isn't a growth motivator. Critics are the best way to improve in anything. Negativity without decent feedback also sucks. But that's exactly the line I drew here on this video. Games need to stop leaning and operating like they are movies. Let them be video games. They need to stop sanitizing and being so God, this word is so hard to say. Homogeneous. You know what I mean. Everything looks, plays, and acts the same, no identity whatsoever. The cultural shift to Asian titles is refreshing because we get to see different perspectives and not the same stories being told over and over. Even IGN complains about it. Modern gaming has a terrible performance issue even when you have high-end hardware. Poor optimization is a cancer, especially when you have gamers that care more about them than the devs themselves. You also have so many issues surrounding the complete misunderstanding of what made a franchise good once. It's almost like the people making them don't actually play video games. No good experimentation to be seen aside from the GOAT this year and so on. I've just played Fear for the very first time, and that gave me a better experience than 90% of games I played in the last, 5 years. And it's not because a mere old game's good, new game's bad. No, it's because it is a product of its time and you can see in its gameplay. But damn, Monolith put their souls into it when they were good. The game has problems, but it is fun. You get to play it. It has identity, and you know from the beginning what you are getting yourself into. No boring characters, no need to dive into political themes or preachiness unnecessarily inside and outside the game. The game always ran well from what I investigated. Gameplay is so fun, atmosphere is tense and gritty, etc. It's way past time that the industry should look back and understand what was working with older games and maybe just pinch down a little bit on prices as well. Because let's be real, it isn't that hard. And this goes for indie devs too. Time to start doing something interesting instead of fast-paced boomer shooters, lit depressed in-the-head story and cozy job simulators. And finally, just don't remake Fear, for Christ's sake, that is not the message.